Welcome to Traceability 101, an information session and panel discussion conducted by members of Global Automation and Identification Group, and made possible by GlobalAutoID's premier member, Barcom Incorporated. Today, we will focus on the importance of an effective traceability program and its impact on supply chain accuracy and security. Our panel for this edition is made up of experts in various aspects of traceability. They are John Rewcastle, president and co-founder of Barcom Incorporated. Barcom has been providing total traceability solutions for over 30 years. Scott Cunningham, sales and marketing manager at MECCO. MECCO has been a leader in direct part marking, or DPM, for over 30 years. They are experts in both impact as well as non-impact technologies that include dot peen and advanced laser systems. Mark Manning, CEO and founder of iTrace Technologies. iTrace, with Mark's extensive experience, is a major designer and supplier of a technology and method for securing traceability and ensuring the integrity of brand protection. Mark sits on a number of committees that are focused on supply chain security and detection and prevention of counterfeit goods. Mark Koethe, founder and CEO of Highmark Systems. Mark and Highmark Systems has been a major supplier of traceability and package verification solutions for the beverage and food packaging industry for many years. Based in Minneapolis, Highmark lists many Fortune 500 companies as loyal clients. Lesley Fahey, Vice President of Marketing at Highmark Systems. Lesley has many years of experience in managing programs for packaging security, particularly in the food and beverage market. Her expertise includes identifying and preventing the introduction of allergens into food products. Ashley Barey, Director of Strategic Development for Temp Time at Zebra Technologies. Ashley has over 10 years of experience in senior product management positions. Global Automation and Identification Group is proud to be a Zebra-certified alliance partner. Our discussion is moderated by Mike Cizek, co-founder and Director of Business Development for Global Automation and Identification Group. Mike has over 40 years of experience in auto ID, traceability, anti-counterfeiting diversion, and vision inspecting solution.
Let's start with John Rewcastle. John, how do you describe traceability?
Traceability is, as far as I'm concerned, is answering three questions: where, when, and how. Where is the last place that it's been seen? When did it get there? And how did it get there? So you're covering everything that goes with it, as far as transportation. That could cover logistics, warehousing, manufacturing, all the different processes it took to answer those questions.
What are the benefits do you see for the entire enterprise of an effective traceability program?
Well, some of the benefits are maybe mandated. I mean, some of them we have, it's forced into compliance by the FDA or customer requirements. So really, the customer drives some of the traceability reasons. For an example, we had it's a manufacturer of cosmetics, and any component that's in the product that touches your face, has to be tracked by the FDA. So say, for instance, they got a 50-gallon drum of some liquid component to go into makeup. Okay, we first need to know the date, time, and lot. Then we need to look at anytime it changes, like sizes. They may take a 50-gallon drum and put it into 1-gallon containers because that's what they need to do the batch of product. Well, anytime they do that, they need to record each container. Then as each container is added to the the end product or the recipe, it has to be tracked. So, and FDA is the one that has made that come into compliance.
John, what are the components of a successful traceability initiative?
Well, I mean, you know, the best ones are if they've already got like lot batch tracking or serial number capability in their ERP system. If they don't have that, then, you know, the first place that's easiest to start is like finished goods. I've got another example of another customer. They made a retail product and shipped them to Walmart. Okay, they shipped them direct to the stores, so they knew how many they shipped. All right, when they received the unit, or when it got returned to them, whether it was warranty, damaged, or Walmart usually doesn't restock anything, they send it back. Once we put serial numbers on the product, then when it was returned, they knew exactly which store it came from. So it was total traceability. In a couple of instances, they had 90% of what they'd shipped to a certain store was being returned. So in the end, you know, that said, well, we don't need to allocate so many to that store. You know, they're returning everything they get. So, you know, let's not push it there.
How important is after-sales support for successful traceability program?
I mean, it's extremely important. Recalls, for instance, you know, we want to reduce vendor exposure. If they've produced a lot of, you know, another example is a car paint manufacturer that we worked with. They found out they created a bad batch of paint. Okay, well, instead of, since they added lot tracking to it, instead of telling every customer, hey, we screwed up, now all they had to do was talk to the one or two customers that bought all of that batch. So it helps their exposure. Customer service on that one, you know, in some cases, you know, hey, it's two customers. They may actually show up at the customer, say, hey, we want the bad product and here's the good product, you know. So it's a win-win there. They're not telling everybody they messed up, and they're really showing they can take care of the customer that, yeah, we gave you some, it had some pink in it or something. I don't know. But, you know, they said that was the problem, is it mixed wrong or something.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Mark Manning with iTrace, what do you want to add to John's comments?
Yeah, John's absolutely right on the value of traceability in these various areas, recalls, and being able to understand where product is ending up and how it's getting back. The applications that we get involved in are more of a higher security application than just a track and trace for you know, basic recalls or, you know, where did this item come from? It's more, how do you fight against counterfeiters and diverters? How do you fight against nation state actors trying to infiltrate the defense supply chain with substandard product? So being able to create a higher security environment that is layered on top of the track and trace applications that John has been talking about is where iTrace comes in.
So, Mark, I would think then that your proprietary iTrace symbology really speaks to what you just said about ensuring that provenance.
Yeah, so we're adding a layer to the existing solutions out there with our proprietary symbology that is providing the secure connection and the security between the data and the product. And that is now being used and is being implemented to connect physical items to digital items in the metaverse. So how do you ensure that a diamond you have in your hand can be connected to the data in the metaverse for that diamond? And then you can have a diamond that is both physical and virtual and could potentially be traded independently. But the link between the two items needs to be a very, very secure link. And again, you can't create that link with a barcode, QR code, serial number, or lot and batch number. You have to have a secure symbology that's going to make that connection. So as we move forward into the future with Web3 applications, the implementation of NFTs on blockchain that are going to connect physical items to the NFT, and that NFT being traded in the metaverse, you need to have something that will give you the confidence and the security that the item you have in your hand is the original item that was recorded and transacted as part of that data. So again, I think there's a whole new evolution in the way that data is going to be transacted around products beyond just track and trace. And as the circular economy expands, you're going to want to know that this item that you're purchasing is used or refurbished does have the original history that is being talked about. When someone says it's 5 years old, are you going to be able to be sure that the item you have in your hand is 5 years old, that it was born on this date, that it was manufactured at this date and time, that it was shipped on this date and time? Again, you can't do that with the standard symbologies, lot, batch, and serial numbers. You need something more secure to understand that no one has tampered with this item and that the item you're verifying and getting provenance for is the original item that you're purchasing. So traditionally, my business has been focused on brands and companies and manufacturers that are trying to solve a particular problem. Why is my product being counterfeit? How is my product ending up in this unauthorized marketplace? Why is somebody selling 10,000 of my watches on eBay, Amazon, or Alibaba? And how are they getting them?
The next question is for Lesley and Mark Koethe with Highmark Systems. You're a leader in packaging verification, particularly in food and beverage industry. In addition to verification and packaging security, how do you fit that information that you capture into a wider traceability program?
Well, it really depends on our customers and how they want to collect and analyze the data. So when we look at the data standards, a lot of people don't have a good standardization for it. So you're shuffling papers and trying to figure out how it all fits together. And when it comes to traceability, it can be a big challenge. So what we do is we look at what they need and we're able to work the systems that we create around a lot of their needs. Mark, can you give an example of that?
Yeah, it's basically, they just need to input that information from somewhere. We're working on one right now where 3 fillers fill pouches and they go into one cartoning package and they want to identify which of the 3 fillers is going into each individual carton. So we're taking that data from their PLC and then printing it on the carton as it's loaded into the carton. So if there's a recall, the customer would not have to unpack every package from the 3 lines. It's just the 1 line.
Do you work with applications to trace product contents back to the source in order to ensure package security and detect and avoid contaminants such as allergens?
All they would have to do is input, a code from somewhere that would identify the current product with that batch.
Do you think they're not asking for it because they don't need it, or they're not aware that it's available?
They're not aware of it yet.
Okay, good. Okay.
I feel like we've been having this discussion for some years now, but it hasn't come forth in the food packaging industry. When we do package verification, we record every single event. Okay. And if there's a failed event or something happens in an event, we can save an image from that event. Okay. And they can go back and inspect it later. Okay. So if there was, information that was available before they started to run, such as a batch code or something where this came from, or some product code that identified where the raw materials were from, we would just attach that to the timestamp of every event.
I see that there's a lot of similarities between food and beverage packaging security and the demands of pharmaceutical.
They're very similar.
Yeah, I would think that there's some overlap there.
When we get into pharmaceutical, there's usually they call it a URS, which is a user requirement specification. Mm-hmm. And it's usually a very long legal document. Mm-hmm. And we've just got to follow everything that's in that URS.
I just want to also just mention the FSMA 204, which is going to be the section 204 of the FDA's Food Safety Modernization Act that's going to be coming up in the next couple of years, where with a lot of this data standardization and things that we're doing, we'll be able to look at some of the ways that we can trace back where some of that food's coming from, especially with the packaging in there. So that's a big focus too, besides just pharmaceutical. But in a way, they go hand in hand in some ways together. So we've been working on different avenues of blogging and with our newsletters and starting to help our customers become aware of that also, because in also January of 2023 here, they added sesame as an allergen and as the 9th allergen. And they didn't give any leeway in packaging for the companies on the labels of that sesame seed or sesame oil. So that's another way we're able to help with that traceability on allergens, because people could have old packaging. What happens when you have old packaging that's not labeled correctly? And somebody with a sesame allergen expects that packaging to be correct. So a couple different ways on there too, on some different sides of traceability also.
Well, I think Mark Manning mentioned about provenance, checking provenance, and knowing where everything came from and when is going to be taken over in a lot of the markets that we haven't seen it in the past. Pharmaceuticals that way now, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it in the food and beverage.
Well, 2025 is when they will enact that section 204 of the FSMA. So that'll be coming up faster than we think.
Ashley with Zebra. Zebra is a recognized global leader in product identification, vision inspection, automation, material handling, quality assurance. How do Zebra's temp time devices that monitor environmental exposures align with overall traceability objectives?
There's been so much talk about kind of on the edges of what we think of as environmental sensing. So temp times actually was purchased by Zebra, and we have rebranded that to environmental sensing. And it makes you think outside of just temperature. So let's think about traceability, what was said. So before it was the when, where and how. When we think of the how at Zebra, because of all of our different technologies, we think of, has it been shaken up too much? Has it been exposed to humidity? Has it been exposed to inappropriate temperatures? So we think about traceability and we want to know a lot more information about it. Going back to Mark's comment around provenance, you want to know where something came from, but you also want to know what condition it's in. And we're excited to have that together. So we have a whole bunch of different things that track that, and we are starting to embed all of that together. So think of a barcode with temperature, or an RFID tag with temperature or humidity, or a BLE tag with temperature and humidity and other types of sensors.
We saw during the COVID pandemic the need to monitor the drugs going in for COVID.
That's right.
For temperature. And I think that's really made people aware of the importance of that and where it goes in the pharmaceutical. Aside from the pharmaceutical, who would be interested or need to have temperature sensors on their products? Produce comes to mind for me.
There is just a ton of different industries that actually monitor all sorts of, different kinds of environmental conditions. When you think of cosmetics, so we talked about that one, all the ingredients, so food has to be traced and you have to know the condition based on all of the FDA rules, right? We talked about FSMA or the Food Safety Act. We also, from a pharmaceutical standpoint, all the ingredients in your pharmaceuticals, anything that you're going to put in your body, but chemicals, batteries, cosmetics, anything that can react to something else or react to its packaging, react to something that's going on around it, all need to be monitored in some way, shape, or form. Just one other comment. You had mentioned the digital product passports in Europe. We have a tendency to follow suit with them from a regulation standpoint. They're already including temperature in that, and they're already starting to look at sustainability based on waste. Why are people throwing things away? So it's the traceability all the way back to what's the provenance of the item and who's actually wasting it and why. So that again, it's that traceability is just taking on so much more information, and how to appropriately exchange that is going to be really exciting as we go forward.
Yeah, not only what products are being disposed of and recycled, but where are they doing it and how are they doing it?
Exactly. So then you start thinking about reverse logistics for traceability. You start thinking about waste logistics for traceability as well.
Okay, good, very good. For everybody here, it only makes sense that traceability is required for any and all manufacturing organizations. I'm going to ask all of you individually. What do you see as the industries that are most at need currently?
So I think pharma and food are right neck and neck for me, and that's probably because I'm a human and I like to eat good food and take drugs that are going to be going to be monitored and okay, and someone knows kind of where they came from for sure.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? Mark Koethe.
I would agree with that.
Okay. Do you see any other industries other than that?
We get involved in building products sometimes.
Okay. Okay. Very well. There's a big area where people are very sensitive on how these products are sourced, but more importantly, how are they disposed of when they reach end of life or are replaced? Our building products. Anybody else want to add to that? Scott, do you want to add to that?
We tend to see manufacturers of durable goods for the types of markings that we do. So I wouldn't say any one particular industry is more urgent than others, but certainly some are further along, right? And by that I mean the automotive industry has been implementing traceability to their suppliers for the last 20 years. I think medical, has more recently followed suit, aerospace, but there are other industries that are just as critical. And I think with the supply chain, with version control, having to have alternative suppliers of the same product, pretty much any industry where you have a multiple suppliers of presumably the same product, I think it's critical to start incorporating sterilization and a full traceability solution, so you can track back to have accountability and root cause and get to holding your supply chain accountable ultimately.
I would agree with that. Back in the late 1990s, the aerospace industry came out with a thing called Spec 2000, and they used a term called cradle to grave tracking, where it started with the manufacturer of the component and tracked it all the way to where it's taken out at end of life or disposed. And I would think that there's many industries that are looking towards that. John, Rewcastle.
I agree with everybody, but especially with the advent of the electric vehicles, the disposal of batteries. They want to see who dumped it.
Right. I think that's a good point.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Mark Manning.
Yeah, so I think where we're seeing the next generation of this is going to be in the expansion of the right to repair regulations and the circular economy. Certainly in consumer electronics, the consumer electronic companies are being forced to allow customers to repair their products or have their products repaired at third-party repair facilities. So that right to repair, where products are, now being sold back into the economy, we see that as being a big expansion of the traceability, because everybody wants to understand how my product has been repaired or how my item has been repaired and who repaired it. I agree with Scott Cunningham. We're seeing a lot of movement in the aerospace industry and the automotive industry, and we've got projects right now in medical device as well. Specifically, as the world is changing, obviously there's the conflict in Ukraine, and other conflicts that are going on around the world. The issue of infiltration of the defense supply chain is becoming a big issue, and certainly for aerospace, and being able to secure that defense supply chain against bad actors. And these are nation state actors. These are not amateur counterfeiters. These are governments and organizations that are professional at creating counterfeits and infiltrating supply chains. So being able to defend against that in aerospace, I think are going to be the important things that we're seeing in the next couple of years.
Question for all of you. Where do you start the conversation within an organization about traceability?
You talk about a top-down or bottom-up approach. A top-down approach, is maybe in a heavily regulated industry like the Department of Defense and UID. You have a very specific construct and way of marking, or maybe you're supplying to one of the big three automakers. There's already a construct and you just have to sort of adopt it on your side. But more often than not, we're seeing a bottom-up approach where companies are looking to implement some sort of traceability system on their own. And when doing that, it's helpful to get a big picture of what they're trying to do rather than sort of stepping into it maybe line by line or product by product and running the risk of having conflicting traceability initiatives, right? Duplicate serial numbers and different schemes for different product lines. So it is important to get all the stakeholders involved early on and at least identify some direction of where we're going and more importantly why. I think when we talk about these traceability initiatives and track and trace and even going so far as to talk about provenance and other emerging initiatives, I think it's easy sometimes for a lot of our customers to get a bit overwhelmed and not necessarily know where to start and how to institute such a grandiose scheme. And I've been doing this for over 20 years, and when I work with customers, I think try to take a step back and look at what type of mark do you want to achieve on the product? What type of mark are you going for? We've talked about lot numbers and part numbers and date of manufacturing, and try to encourage some best practices like getting a unique ID, right? Something that is like a serial number specific to that particular part and that part alone. We look at things like what does the mark have to survive? Is this a mark that's going to go through a manufacturing process where you're going to go through maybe a shot blast or some other degrading, process that could, erode a label or a mark of some other sort. And then we look at, what's the type of mark? What are you doing with this mark? Are you going to read it in-house? Is this going to go to your customer? Are they going to use this traceability code like in the automotive industry where it's a child serial number that's going to get rolled up into a master VIN number that is going to have all the dependent part numbers associated with it? So I think just understanding what they want to do and why they want to do it. Is this regulated or is this being driven internally? Is there already a spec for how they have to comply, or do they have the ability to sort of create their own process internally?
We are generally working with people who've come to us with a problem that their supply chain is already compromised. Ensure it doesn't occur again going forward, or understand how products are either leaving or entering their supply chain unofficially. So we get involved with a couple of different levels. Quite often it's the legal team who are tasked with fighting counterfeit and gray market trading issues, enforcing their contracts, working with government organizations and customs around the world to take down counterfeit operations. And we also work with the operations and supply chain folks who are having to implement a solution to help their legal team fight counterfeit and diversion of their products. The other folks that we've worked with in aerospace are, interestingly enough, on the cybersecurity side. The cybersecurity business, or portion of the business, has been tasked with securing the supply chain. As supply chains are, becoming more and more digital these days, the cybersecurity teams are getting involved in securing that supply chain from a data perspective and a product perspective. So we're seeing multiple entry points within different organizations and multiple parts of that organization coming to us to help them solve the same problems.
So would you agree that multiple management levels have to be involved in these discussions?
Oh, definitely.
For sure. We touch almost every part of the business, as I'm sure John and Scott would contest as well. I mean, we touch many different parts of the business, and certainly on our side, we end up in the marketing team as well, because marketing want to get involved in the customer authentication and the customer experience of the integration of supply chain with that consumer connection and consumer authentication. So, you're working with supply chain, you're working with manufacturing, you're working with operations, you're working with marketing, potentially the sales team. Every part of the organization gets involved in these projects.
John, you started to agree?
No, I totally agree. And, I guess one common denominator is money, whether it's lawsuit, or, that the lawyers, they get into that. I mean, we even, like Mark was saying, for construction, a beam that goes in a bridge has traceability all the way back to the mill that made the beam. So yeah, it's everywhere.
Okay. Anybody want to add anything to this?
I just have one other persona to this that often gets overlooked, and that's just the quality personnel. Quality oftentimes, when the mention of the URS of all those requirements, they are usually dictating many of the things behind the scenes that have to happen with sterilization or with regulation. Oftentimes, the regulatory people report into quality and are the ones who are the most versed. And oftentimes they're what I like to call the silent dissenters in certain cycles, which is you don't see them. It's kind of like the lawyers, but someone is saying no in the background, and you're having a hard time kind of working on a project. So I always like to make sure that they've been included in one, some way, shape, or form in any traceability project.
Just along with what Ashley was saying on the quality side, a lot of companies, when they're starting to justify a traceability initiative, maybe it's some sort of event that triggers, having to implement some sort of process. I think that the interesting thing there is if you can have a traceability solution already standing, already up and running, it's not going to prevent every issue, but I think we've talked about other cases where if you have the data and you have the traceability already in place, it's a lot easier to implement some sort of corrective actions and prevent that from ever happening than going out after the fact, trying to get your arms around this problem and doing something bespoke and custom for just that one area of the business. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ashley. This is, if you can get quality.
I would definitely second in terms of an ROI for traceability is also around those corrective actions. So how many people, I won't make the joke about how many people does it, take to screw in the light bulb, right? But it's just how many people does it take to actually do a CAPA or a corrective action, and what could have been prevented? That's a great way to look at that from a measurement stick to say in the past 5 years, what has happened, and could we, we can show you how that would have, been different.
Most companies have already done studies, and they know what their rework and customer experience costs them. So I think you're made an excellent point, Ashley. Thank you. Anybody else?
To go on with what Ashley said, when you look at your ROI, hey, we missed a tracing point because somebody didn't scan what they were supposed to do, or something like that. So that's where things like RFID or, machine vision come into play. So, I'm not looking at anybody having to do anything different. They unloaded the pallet off of the truck to start off with. I don't have to wait till somebody scans it. I know when it came off the truck, whether it's vision or RFID.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of this too started out, and where this comes in play with the quality assurance is in the electronics industry, when we were still talking about board level components and things like this. They learned very early on, start scanning and tracking a board, for instance, early on in the process, before components are added to it. Catch it before value is added to that product. That's the time to do it. So I think the thing I've learned over the years is start early. I think Scott alluded to this. As early as possible, start your traceability program. And the attitude of traceability, the importance of it has to start at the top end of the company. I think people have to buy into it, and then you have to work it from both the top down and the bottom up.